which brings us to the panel of our students, our former students and current students. Unfortunately, I don't. A couple of our current students are involved. They are two activists on campus, and they're involved in an incident right now. So they will or may not be able to join us, but so if they do, they will join us late. But in the spirit of what we're talking about, I stand with them in solidarity and support what they're doing. So they may join us and may not. But we have three fantastic panelists today to talk about the experience. I'm very excited about this. I'm just going to say their names and their years and leave it at that. And then they can talk about their experiences here, and we'll turn it over to Dr. Bolden to moderate after that. So we have Maria Beg, who is from, you'll have to talk to get your screen to pop up. You have to say hi. Who graduated from AAAS in 2010, if I remember correctly, and is now a lawyer, which is fantastic, right? And she did the Islamic, Arabic and Islamic track, was her concentration. And then we have Dr. Derrais Carter, who was here when I first came and was in my very first class. And we can't see it today, but it's behind me. Made me a quilt as I questioned Underground Railroad quilts in class. And he presented me with a quilt at the end of the semester, which I hung very quickly on my wall, and it's never moved since. So it's fantastic to see him as well. And Owen McDonald, and I should say Derrais graduated in 2008 from us, and then went on to get his PhD at the University of Iowa. Owen McDonald, who's our most recent graduate, came to us through the Latin American Studies and History side of the university and joined us in African American Studies for his master's degree. So he's the example of doing a master's with us. He's currently at the University of Illinois working on his PhD, and he works on the diaspora, in particular works on labor and Afro-Brazilian connections, so which is some fantastic work as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bolden to moderate the session and let these fantastic students tell us about their experience in our department, and we'll go from there. And it's great to see everyone.
All right, how's everybody? I think what I'd like to do is just move in alphabetical order. And there's 6 questions, and so I'm just going to give everyone about, let's say about 3 to 5 minutes to respond to each question, and then we can sort of open it up and have a discussion. And if there are any other reflections that come to mind, please feel free to share those. So the first question, or the first question to first respondent or commentator is to Maria Beg. So Maria, what years were you in the department? What was your area of concentration? Why did you choose AAAS as your major, minor, graduate focus? Do you have any professors that stood out for you during your time? So we've talked a little bit about what you're doing now, but you can certainly, please feel free to elaborate. And, if there are any other sort of connections between what you're doing and what you learned here, please outline those. And if any of our current students come, we'll have a question for them. But why don't you go ahead and start off, Maria, and then we can sort of come back if there are other things that you'd like to say, or anything that you didn't respond to initially.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be back and see some familiar faces that I haven't seen in years. I was at KU from 2006 to 2010. And so AAAS was my major. I focused on North Africa and the Middle East, with the concentration on religious structures and political systems. And so a lot of my focus revolved around that area. I got interested in AAAS as a major when I started taking Arabic classes. As a practicing Muslim, I always had an interest in learning Arabic and getting to know more about, the political structures and the religious influences in certain countries, in particular, North Africa and the Middle East. And so when I found out that there was a way I could major in it, it was like a perfect fit. I was like, oh, this is great. This is what I want to major in. I had started off with a political science major and took a few classes, and it just wasn't piquing my interest. And then when I found out about the AAAS program, and that I could major in it, I was very excited, because it fit in very nicely to my personal interests, and then also the career path I wanted to take. I knew I wanted to go to law school. And so this felt like it was a really great way to kind of set me up for success moving down, because, I probably didn't realize it at the time, but now looking back, so many people are like, oh, what are you going to do with an African studies major? Like, what's that going to do for you in the future? And now I just want to be like, everybody should major in it. Like, you learn so many important skills, especially when I went to law school. I learned, the research and writing, getting introduced to different cultures, different political systems, the way that different countries structure their systems, and how it's so different from what we have here in the United States. In some ways it's so much better, and some ways there's always downsides, but it was such a great introduction, and it set such a really good foundation for me to set me up for what I wanted to do in the future. And a big part of that I have is to thank Dr. Busafara, who was my mentor when I was at KU. I don't think she's there anymore. I actually think she might have gone back to Tunisia. But she was a huge influence on me and was a really great help. And also a shout out to Dr. Bolden, because he taught my senior research class in writing, which helped me develop a lot of the skills that I used in law school. So yeah, it was really great. It was an amazing experience. Another thing is, a lot of my focus was on North Africa and the Middle East, but since there's also the African American component, I got to take some other classes that also really helped develop, a lot of the interests that I have in terms of social justice and awareness of what impacts the African American community. I had a class, I believe the professor was Dr. Danielle Johnson, and it was a class that talked about just the impact and different experiences of African American men and women in the United States. And we read this book called Why Are So Many Black Men in Prison? And we went to one of the federal prisons, and we did a whole section on that. And it was such an amazing class, because I learned so much about the racial injustices and the systemic racism that we have within our legal system. And even though that's not an area of the law that I practice in, it's an area that I have an interest in. So I try to do a lot of volunteer work and, in different areas, and having that background from that class, it has helped me so much now. You know, it's taught me, it was kind of the foundation that showed me what inequalities we have in our justice system, from the sentencing guidelines to the way certain crimes are punished, to the way certain people of color are targeted. So I look back on my experience at KU and the AAAS program, and I realize how many varying experiences I was able to have and how much I was able to learn that I don't know that I necessarily appreciated as much at the time, but now looking back and how much it set me up for my future, it's really been invaluable. When I graduated KU, I went to law school at UMKC, and I focused on international and comparative law. And that set me up to where afterwards I graduated law school, I moved out to LA. So I live in California now, and I practiced in immigration for several years. And just having that background, knowing how, having that insight to understand how different countries work, how different countries have different political systems, and knowing that, you know, our immigration laws in this country are one way, but, you know, so many of the things that impact other people in other countries and their reasons to flee and seek asylum and, you know, fleeing from persecution, all of that was a really great, you know, my AAAS background helped me have a better understanding and to be a little bit more sympathetic and try and really understand where people were coming from when they were fleeing their countries and coming to the United States. I don't practice in immigration anymore. Now I do employment law, but it's still the research and writing skills that I learned have been so, you know, amazing that it's really set me up for my career that I have now. So I'm very, very thankful for those experiences.
Wow. Well, I hope we can get you to come back, even if it's a virtual, would, you know, probably be easier, to talk to some of our current students, because I think that the nexus that you know established, that you've achieved, you know, AAAS and legal studies is something that our students should think a lot more about. And so thank you so much. And we are very proud of you and what you have accomplished. Next up is the professor, the student who went on to become a professor and leading scholar in his own right. So to you, Derrais, what years were you in the department? What was your area of concentration? If you, maybe you had more than one area of concentration. Why did you choose AAAS as your major? Since you have become a scholar, and, you know, people, you know, he may or may not say this, but he is under contract to publish in the very prestigious Bloomsbury 33 1/3 series. For those of you who may not know, it is a very prestigious series of publications about popular music. Now, something Professor Carter probably does not know is that a professor at the University of Iowa named Peter Nazareth, who used to teach African literature, he's actually I don't know, I think he's retired now, but he was a novelist by trade, wrote radio plays, but great critical mind. But he was someone who initially, way back in the 80s, was thinking about the concept that Bloomsbury eventually sort of materialized, the notion of a very small pocket, a pocket-sized, literally a pocket-sized book of criticism that would be short and brief and potent, that people might want to read. And so, so Professor, what stood out to you, in addition to things that I've asked already, and in terms of professors and courses, et cetera? You've got the floor.
Thank you so much, Professor Alexander. Good looking out on the invitation. You know, I'm always ready and willing to come back and say the things about AAAS. Professor Bolden, you know, you're part of the audience for that Bloomsbury book, right? Like, I'm writing to folks like you primarily because, you know, even going to your job talk, right? Learning that you were doing this work on funk helped me understand that that work was possible. So I'm deeply appreciative that y'all would trust me to come and say the things. I was at KU in AAAS from 2006 to 2008. And mind you, this is after some not so glamorous years as an undergraduate. I went to a number of different schools. The first one I went to that wasn't a community college, they invited me to go back home and get my act together. And I spent a few months working in a Foot Locker. This was right around the time that Kanye's first album, College Dropout, came out. And I had a whole lot of feels. I was listening to that album every day in my little Acura Legend with one headlight just really kind of wobbled a little bit. So I was trying to figure some things out. When I eventually went back to school, I was at Emporia State, and I knew I wanted to do work on race and ethnicity. I knew I wanted to do work on gender, but I didn't have KU money yet, right? It took me a couple of years at Emporia State, majoring in sociology, getting my GPA together to get to a point where I could finally be competitive even as an undergrad. And so a number of my friends that were at KU at the time were telling me about this cat who was teaching these classes that were just like blowing their minds all the time. The dude named Chico, right? Chico Herbison. They're like, D, okay, if you're interested in Black culture, you're interested in literature, film, music, it doesn't matter. You need to take a Chico class. And I kid you not, right when I applied to KU, I was also preparing to do a semester abroad at the University of Ghana. This was spring of 2006. And so I hopped in my car. I drove from Emporia to Lawrence. I scheduled a meeting with the then chair, Peter Apokadu. And I sat in his office. I introduced myself and I said, hey, I just submitted my application. I definitely want to come here. I want to get a degree. I was like, I could graduate in a semester at Emporia with a sociology degree, but I know that I want and need a AAAS degree. I was like, I knew that I wanted to get my PhD. I really wanted to be a grad student. I couldn't even imagine life as a professor. I just wanted to be a nerd hanging out in stacks the whole nine. And I went and had that conversation with Dr. Apokadu. He was like, you know, I'm going to be looking for you on campus. And sure enough, a few months later, I was right there. I took classes with, I'd say some of the courses that stand out. Dorothy Pennington's African American culture class, in part because, we would have debates in that class. And Pennington brought, you know, I ain't gonna lie, I think a lot of us underestimated Dr. Pennington, like those first few weeks. But then she would come into a class and then just kind of casually talk about how she's thinking about psychoanalysis, Condoleezza Rice, and like Birmingham bombings and KKK and white supremacist terror. And it's like, you know, I would never be so familiar as to be like, Dorothy, what you talking about, right? Which is to say, Dorothy, you were saying a whole lot right now. But what I would say is Dr. Pennington, like, you kind of got me shook because she would kind of like fold us into these conversations, which were about African retentions, right? She would fold us into these conversations that I didn't understand later on were largely about like cultivating a Black aesthetic sensibility. And so her classes stand out to me. Dr. Alexander, you made me want to get my historical chops together between your survey course, but also sitting and doing an independent study, you shared some stories with me about UMass Amherst Afro-American Studies Department. And when I tell you, I modeled my time as a graduate student, wanting to understand microfilm, wanting to understand archival research after the stories that you shared with me. You're the reason, you are in large part the reason why I was able to even design my first book proposal. Primarily because I knew that as an interdisciplinary graduate student, I wanted to prove to folks in various disciplines that I got the chops, right? And so in your classes, I was like, I need to know archival research. I'd go to special collections, I'd be combing through letters, not really sure what I was going to do, but I wanted to understand how to handle historical documents, right? And how to build stories, how to build narratives from that. Chico's classes, Black pop music, I'll never forget going into that class where this man sat in my face and said, we're gonna read 7 biographies in a semester. And the way that my relationship to literacy was set up at that point, it was like, you know, I can skim some stuff, but you want me to read these 7 books? And they were like 7 biographies. And so I would go into this class, I'd sit and be absolutely immersed in the discussion. I love the stories. I love the concepts that we were exploring. But one thing that really resonated with me was that the way that folks were designing books, like Chico helped me think about the book as a form. Chico helped me think about like how a scholar could go in and break a form open so that, you know, we're reading David Ritz's biography, Divided Soul, right, about Marvin Gaye. And we're also thinking about Michael Eric Dyson's Holla If You Hear Me, his study of Tupac, right? We're also thinking about Bessie Smith. And so I was like, oh, history isn't just like reciting all of these facts, right? It's weaving stories, it's thinking about narrative, it's also folding in interpretation, because Farrah Jasmine Griffin's study of Billie Holiday, If You Can't Be Free, Be a Mystery, I still cite it in class today, right? Been reading it since I was an undergrad at KU. And so being able to geek out at a research university was so pivotal to me, primarily because I knew that the school that I was at wasn't equipped to give me the kind of training that I knew I needed to be a strong graduate student, right? And mind you, all through grad school, I'm being told, hey, you really can't write. You know, the problem wasn't that I couldn't write. The problem was that I hadn't found my form, right? KU gave me the research chops that I needed and the confidence that I needed to be able to figure out my form, right? It took a bit, but what I know, what I can say for certain, right, is that by the time I finished my PhD at the University of Iowa, which I know about because of Professor Alexander and also Dr. Bolden. Like, y'all are the reason that University of Iowa was even on my radar, right? Nazareth, he retired from there. I've been combing through Ishmael Reed's papers. You can still see exchanges between Nazareth and Ishmael Reed. So I know about all of that stuff. And I had to put some respect on University of Iowa's name because of you two, right? And I knew that I was going there to get a PhD in American Studies, but I went there with the goal, with the objective of working specifically with Black faculty, right? I showed up to that campus right like in the midst of a major hiring cluster in Black studies, right? And so while the department wasn't offering an MA anymore, because I think both of y'all got your MAs in African American World Studies, right? It was like, I knew they had folks there that had stories, that had resources that could help me be the kind of scholar that I wanted to be, right? And so KU primed me for that. It also became a place where I got to show up to all of these talks. Martin Bernal, Gwendolyn Pugh, Byron Hurt, Sarah Ahmed, and a few other folks, right? Like, I'm sitting in these seminar rooms with faculty members and graduate students reading papers that are workshopped about, like, you know, classics being taught at HBCUs, right? Or I'm like going to a talk and trying to figure out, well, okay, Gwendolyn Pugh's doing this presentation on hip hop feminism. At the time, I was interested in Black male feminism. And so I'm like trying to build up the chops to ask these questions in Q&A. And so one of the other things that I got from KU was like, I know how to ask a question. That, look, every now and then, I may write just okay. You know, I can read good, but I know without a doubt, I can ask a really compelling question during a Q&A, but that's something that I got from my time as an undergrad there, right? And y'all, quiet as it's kept, right? I've been trying to orchestrate this plan for years, wherein I'm like, hey, started out at KU, trying to end at KU too. Y'all, I'm trying to come home. I am down the street. I'm gonna throw that out here so it's recorded, right? One of the things I've been constantly thinking about is, right, how can I give back to this department that has helped make me the scholar that I am, right? Like the book that Dr. Bolden was referring to, I'm writing a study of Marvin Gaye's album, I Want You. And that's a project that's possible in part because of an undergrad seminar paper that I wrote, trying to figure out what the hell Marvin Gaye was doing and, with these different albums. And so much of what I get to now take seriously in terms of my professional, my creative practice was made possible at KU. Like, y'all gave me permission, right? Y'all gave me permission to go into the law library on the weekends, right? And comb through microfilm, right? Like, Professor Alexander, you told me a few stories that just made me want to sit and just pour through reel after reel after reel of microfilm, right? I have another book that's contracted with University of North Carolina Press about an obscenity scandal that happened 100 years ago in Washington, D.C. And I'm writing about the ways that Black girls survived the sexual advances of a Dutchman claiming to be an anthropologist to access Black school children's bodies. I only know about that scandal because my first year as a graduate student, I spent my weekends combing through all of this microfilm. I was looking at Black newspapers. I was looking at organizational papers for NAACP, SNCC Corps, the whole nine. And I was like, well, look, you got to prove to the historians that you can history as a verb, right? And so combing through these materials, trying to find information on Washington, D.C.'s first all-Black firefighting unit because of some photographs that had been taken by, Kansas photographer Gordon Parks. And as I'm combing through these old Black newspaper microfilm, I'm like noticing that there's mention of the scandal. And so I decide those first few months of grad school, I'm just gonna, make a few copies, put it in the folder, tuck it away. Fast forward 5 years. That little folder of information became really just the first chapter of my dissertation, which was a study of New Negro representation in Washington, D.C. And the week before my dissertation defense, I found a treasure trove of FBI material that had been freshly digitized. And so I said, oh, maybe you have a book. And so all that's to say, right? Like I appreciate the minor, right? I appreciate those small things that we kind of reinforce over and over and over. And I can't help but think back to all of these small things, these assurances, these skills, and these opportunities that were provided by the folks at AAAS, because I wouldn't be able to sit in these classrooms. I'm a Black Studies scholar tucked away in the Gender and Women's Studies department at the University of Arizona, but I get to do the work that I'm doing now the way that I do it because of the strong foundation that y'all provided. So, yeah. Thanks, y'all.
Well, very good. What can you say, right? You all are great. Now we turn to Owen McDonald, who will soon become a PhD. And so, Owen, again, what years were you in the department? What was or were your areas of concentration? Why did you choose AAAS? And if there are any specific experiences that stand out, please let us know. Share those experiences with us. And how has your current graduate work and your research related to what you did here?
Yeah, thanks for those questions and thanks for having me. And maybe the most like current grad student thing, I actually typed up my response of what I was going to say to these questions. So I'll dive into that first, and then maybe at the end can talk a bit about what my research is looking like right now. So I did my bachelor's at KU, not in AAAS, from 2013 to 2017, and my MA in AAAS from 2017 to 2019. And my thesis was titled Revolutionary Transnationalism, the Revolutionary Action Movement, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and the Black Power Movement in the United States and Brazil, which argued the Black Power movements in Brazil and the US were culturally and politically mutually constituting in the context of the US in the late 60s and early 70s in the Brazilian military dictatorship. So my undergraduate degree was not in AAAS, but I was aware of the department from the time the student activists Rock Shock and Visible Hawk presented a list of demands to the former chancellor at a university town hall to address the ongoing rampant racism at KU. That was linked up right about the time I studied abroad in Brazil for the first time. And it was around 2016 when a lot was happening in Brazil as well. And it was really forced me to confront how, despite the specificities of local context, connected the demands these Brazilian activists were making to the demands of the Black student activists back in Lawrence. So kind of with that in the background before I entered the academic program, it was my senior year, actually, that I took my first AAAS class. It was Black Intellectual History with Shawn and classmates like Allison, who I think is on the call, Karam, Michaela, among others, and saw what was possible in the realm of Black studies to connect, as the opening slideshow said, the academe with activism. So while this foundation was great, I still applied for a bunch of history PhD programs, hoping to study Brazilian history from a somewhat abstract historian's distance, and luckily was rejected to every program that I applied to. My two acceptances were to a non-funded UChicago MA program and AAAS at KU, and I'm so glad that I enrolled at AAAS, the AAAS Master's Program. It was really a chance to further explore the global connections of the Black freedom struggle, think deeply about positionality, reflexivity, and ethics in research and writing, and imagine the radical potential of Black studies scholarship and teaching. I'm now in a history PhD program at University of Illinois, but Black studies remains, kind of like Derrais was saying. I'm a Black studies scholar in a history department. It remains the heart of my academic and personal pursuits. And I really feel like, based on growing out of KU, it's the intellectual community I hold myself most accountable to, and the scholarship that most excites me about the possibilities for understanding and challenging, among other things, as Dr. Burdenstelli earlier theorizes, modern racial capitalism. So those are the great things, but it's this love for AAAS that makes me so angry about the institutional disregard for Black studies at the level of the KU administration. Chancellor Gerard, Provost Fischelmeyer, and the Board of Regents, I feel, are attacking Black studies and other programs committed to the global freedom struggle. They're undermining academic freedom by threatening tenure. Well, unless you're a basketball coach of predominantly Black unpaid athletic workers, they're refusing to pay graduate teaching assistants a living wage or share basic financial information in bargaining with the Graduate Teaching Assistant Coalition. And they're making Black undergraduate and graduate students face a racist learning and work environment, as evidenced by some of our panelists having to be doing activism currently. So I really don't think I would have survived the MA program without the network of faculty and social support I had built during undergrad, both in and outside of AAAS and other spaces on campus, which were of course facilitated by sexism and white supremacy that undergird academia. I feel like it really affects the AAAS department, as AAAS faculty are often forced to split their appointments between AAAS and other home departments, meaning that apart from faculty who taught core classes like Shawn, Professor Bolden, Dr. Pokadu, Dr. Pennington, and more. The graduate students really saw few professors in our day-to-day, like being in Bailey Hall. I was advised via these networks to use my other MA acceptance to guarantee 2 years of GTA funding. But with the way the budget is right now, most students are only granted 1 year of funding, which means instead of focusing on their MA theses, many MA students are spending their second year scrambling for outside funding that come with course load stipulations or steep work requirements. And funding or not, MA students are taking out loans to study in this program. So for my Black colleagues, particularly Black women colleagues and/or colleagues who didn't transition straight from KU undergrad, the administrative attack on Black studies really undermines the experience of the MA program. So because AAAS at KU means so much to me, I think we really need to center that and keep and follow in the footsteps of the tillers of the soil, like the panel earlier, Rock Chalk Invisible Hawk, who had a profound impact on me in the mid-2010s, and the current student activists who are demanding better from this already great but faced with stresses program.
All right, well, not much to say after he said what did he say? He said a word. So so we have a few minutes left.
Tony, Azja Butler has joined us.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay.
who is one of our current students.
Sure.
And we'll give Azja some time to answer. It's great to see you, Azja. I told them that you, as you could see by Owen's comments, what you guys were off doing. So so I appreciate you taking the time and joining us. And Dr. Bolden will take it over from here and ask you the questions that you were sent, but to set you up. So.
Thank you.
Well, hello, Azja.
Hello, sir. I'm good. It's been a minute, but hi.
Yes. Well, you know, now people don't know, but I got a chance to speak with Azja before she enrolled, and she was one of my students in AAAS 104, which is the Introduction to African American Studies. Azja, so what years have you been in the department? Do you have an area of concentration or areas of concentration? Why did you choose AAAS? If there are any professors, experiences, or what have you that stood out or have stood out during your time here, please share those. And what do you think, or what do you envision, you know, after your time here?
Yeah, no, totally. Hi everyone. I first like to apologize for being late because, as Owen said, the university is being sus, as it always is for the Black folk, and so it's just a lot. But I wanted to try to make it here because this department does mean a lot to me. So I've been in the program now technically for 3 years, almost 4 as an undergraduate. I'm also a double major, so I'm also in the education department, so I can teach like secondary level education. And so when I got here, my initial plan was to be a double major and to be equally as, you know, involved in both departments. And due to just some university things and a lot of just like sometimes like negative interactions with professors, you know, they were telling me like, maybe you should try and get a minor in AAAS or maybe just not get the degree at all because I don't think you can balance it. And so I was really discouraged from the education department from taking on both of the degrees. And I never officially like dropped it. I just like started taking less and less classes just due to like that kind of lack of support I was getting from my competing, I guess, which I don't know why that's the case, Department of Education. And while I do love a lot of the people there, it's like really exhausting being like a Black woman in an education department that's predominantly white and like white women that are not focused on all of the same things. And so I've been in it that long. And luckily I had a lot of really awesome professors and people keep in contact with me and kind of keep me roped into things, like mostly Professor Bolden and Professor Alexander, which I'm more than thankful for. Things that I've learned in the program, I think the thing that I'm most grateful for, or like that I acknowledge, is just like the balance that it creates. It's just like, it can be really hard to be in a predominantly white institution. And so kind of like be trying to figure out like, I don't know, just like where all of the intersections of like what you're trying to learn are. And so a lot of my focus or study is like, I think everything about, you know, being like Black and studying Black history is important, obviously, but my intersection and thing that I want to focus on is just like, it's really hard to be a Black student. And I think a lot of Black students can relate to being in classrooms that are dictated by kind of a white imaginary or white academics and what that's supposed to look like. And so I'm really interested in like Black pedagogy and how do we teach Black students better, both in the K through 12 sense, but also in a secondary or like in a post-secondary school lens. And so I definitely want to stay and get my degree. And I know there's like a lot of tropes about whether or not you should stay at your institution or not stay and come back. And so I'm kind of battling with that because, you know, as Professor Carter said, like, I don't want to be in a position where I'm like, I'm waiting to come back. Like, I really like it here and I love the program. So it's definitely interesting trying to figure out all those things, but I definitely appreciate all of the conversations and the support that I get from this program. Like Owen said, like at KU, it's like, you're not just a student. Sometimes you have to be, you know, an activist and you have to be doing things to support like the people. And I think like the AAAS department, among like a few others, like are really always supportive of what we're doing, even if it's not in a traditional academic sense, because I think that like you all always just recognize, you know, like learning doesn't always happen in the classroom. It happens through experience or the choices that we make. And so I'm always really, I'm always really appreciative of that. I don't know if that's all of the questions because I kind of missed like, or not missed them, but like there was a lot, but they all seem kind of interconnected. But yeah, no, I definitely want to stay and eventually, you know, get my doctorate in like, I think it's pedagogical communication. So it's like the study of teaching. And a lot of the stuff that I'm interested in is just like the way that Blackness is perceived through communication and rhetoric. But also just like visual tropes and perceptions of those things and the way that it influences the way that white teachers teach Black kids. Because a lot of the time that the way that they are perceived is through, you know, the way that they look, and being a biracial Black woman, it is very perception and tropes are always something that I deal with because it's like, we don't see it. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've been doing here, the way that I've been supported. And luckily I have like a great group of people that have supported me. So I am going to be a lot more involved in the program now that I'm not feeling so much pressure from just the education department to only do one. And hopefully I'll get that done in the next 2 years. That's the goal. But yeah, so I'm more than appreciative and I learn like every day that I'm in this program, and I'm very lucky, as I think everyone here has made very clear. So I'm young, I'm still learning, but appreciative all just the same. And it's definitely helped me also just balance all of the like activism, get involved things. Cause like I said, it's all very much, but it's great having a support system like KU's AAAS program. So yeah.
Well, again, wow. You said a word. I think I would say, so here's what I'll say as a segue. So Azja and Derrais both talked about sort of what you might call unconventional, you know, routes to learning. And, you know, that's actually empirical data, learning from experience. All, you know, we're all different. And one of the things that we want to do in our department is accommodate people who have various styles of learning, right? You know, not just from different backgrounds, but people who have different learning styles. You know, I wasn't always a great student myself. I was just, you know, I took the wrong route too. This is not about me, but it's just to say you're in the right place. And do what you believe. Do what you actually have a passion for, and that's what, you know, the intellectual and the critical skills will kick in and develop, and you'll be able to apply those to the utmost. So is it okay now to have, I think, questions? So if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A component of the screen for our students. And but while we're waiting for questions, see, Maria, since you went first, do you have anything that you'd like to share that you left out, or any responses to some of the other commentaries?
I don't know if there's anything that I left out. I feel like I talked a lot. But I will say for Azja, is that how you pronounce your name? I apologize if I pronounce it wrong. Azja.
No,
okay.
yeah, you're totally good. Yeah.
I think it's so great how involved students are now on campus, and I want to empower you to continue with that, because it will really, it's going to impact the rest of your life, right? Like it's so important that especially being in such a large institution, that you find that group of people that really support you. And we're so lucky that we have AAAS, because that's the group that's going to have your back, right? Like even Professor Alexander, when he was like, oh, some of the students are held up doing activism, he was like, I support what they're doing, right? Like that is so important, especially in this time and, you know, the revolution and the movements that we're going through. So I know it can get hard to feel like you're juggling so many things at one time, but it's so amazing to hear that, you know, somebody of your age and somebody who is balancing so many things is able to do so much. So I wanted to applaud you specifically and encourage you to keep with it, you know, like, especially in the education system, it's so needed to have teachers that come from that background, that can relate to their students and can really share that experience. So then your students don't feel isolated the way that so many of us have in the educational system. So it's so important. I'm so happy to hear everything that you're doing. And I love that AAAS is encouraging you to continue to do that, because that's what we need. We need the support to continue to do the things that motivate us and the things that we really feel empowered by, and we know that it's going to make an impact.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else have?
We've got 2 questions in the Q&A.
Oh, we do?
Well.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see it. If you can't, I can read them.
I didn't see that.
I can do it. First, I will read more of a statement. Those from the department will know Peter Opokudu is sending me texts, which is what we do on Zoom calls. So I want to, and this is completely a Peter Opokudu text. So wants me to say to Maria that he's so proud of you for winning first place in our undergraduate student research competition here at KU. He wants to say to Derrais, he still remembers your visit and the long discussion in his office, and that you kept your promise and didn't let him down, didn't let us down. Wants Owen to know that he remembers his reflexive paper in our research design class, and it's so good to see and hear you from all of you. And he says to Azja, just great job for your achievements and activism. What we didn't say, of course, to Azja is Azja is a debate champion, right? And so congratulations, Azja, and as well We'll say this because he was brought up. Azja was the recipient of Chico Herberson's Student Award this year, which is also a wonderful thing. As I said last night, that was my favorite thing of being, my first job as chair was to distribute funds in honor of Chico's family, and Azja was the person that received that. And so he's so thankful and appreciates your achievements and activism that you do on this campus. And we see, for those who don't know, because I mentioned it earlier, Azja is involved with all the groups, but she, I believe, still is the president of the Jayhawker Liberation Front, which one of our founders, John Spearman, and I laughed and loved the title when I told him that we have a student group named the Jayhawker Liberation Front, right? That connects to Black Studies and what we do. So it was very good. And so the last thing Peter says is just wants to thank everyone for this virtual homecoming, right? So that was Peter sending me his text. And so now I will go to the other questions. So the question for all, how did you find your niche or concentration within AAAS? So it's to everyone, so any order that you want to take here. I mean, some of you answered it to some degree, right? But if you want to give a little bit more.
Yeah, I can just say quickly, I came in knowing that I wanted to understand more about African-American culture. I didn't know what particular aspect, so I knew it was going to be music, there was going to be some literature. And mind you, I never took an AFAM Lit class at KU. I had one in my entire time as an undergrad, but that didn't stop me from talking with Professor Tidwell or Miriam McGraham. Like, y'all, if just an absolute treasure of a scholar, right? And so for me, yeah, I knew it was going to be culture. I was geeking out on music, but I knew that all that stuff was connected. And so I was like, well, so much, the way the anti-Blackness is set up, so many people are going to say, oh, we're interested in Black popular music. That's very, very specific. It's actually not, right? Because we could work through like Rancière Foucault, we can work through like Agape, we could work through Madimbe, we can work through all these folks. And so for me, it was really understanding that like specializing with music still gave me the basics to like get all the methodological chops that I would need later on. So I was just going to geek out.
I had touched on this a little bit, but I fell into my concentration with, you know, the Islamic Studies program and the political structures just by, you know, my personal interests that I had. And I was able to take a variety of different classes and realize that there was so much out there within the AAAS program that I could find something that was both personally really important to me, you know, as a practicing Muslim, understanding the political structures of different Muslim countries, because I think, you know, my senior paper I wrote on, I focused on Tunisia and whether or not their laws were contradictory or complementary to Islamic law. So it was just something that I had a personal interest in. And then, you know, also having Dr. Busafara, who was a really great mentor, and then just taking kind of a variety of classes until I found something that really spiked my interest that I wanted to continue to pursue.
Anybody else want to respond?
I think for me, I think like, not to be cheesy, but like education is kind of like elevation for me. Like the more that I know, the more kind of like, I don't know, I just think like being Black in America or being Black period, like it's really easy to feel out of control and feel like there's just a lot of things that can't go our way ever. And I think for me, that's how I felt in school, because that's just like up until now, like I'm only like 20. So like all I know is school most of the time. It's like all I do. And so it's really easy to feel overwhelmed and out of control of things. And I think for me, going into AAAS meant finding a language and getting familiar with a language that I could use and apply to all the other places that I was like, okay, I don't really know if I understand this. And so it gave me a route to understand and like pick and choose things that I could control. So with school, it was like, school is really hard. It was really hard for me. How can I make it less hard for students that are like me in the future? And so that was something that I could take back for myself through what I learned in AAAS. But yeah.
So I don't know if y'all saw this, but at least on grad student Twitter, there was a tweet that went viral in the last week that was like, "White man, how did you come to your research interests?" And it was like, "Oh, I found something cool." And then it's like, "Scholars of color, I'm trying to find the tools to unpack generations of trauma," or something. And I think there's something to that tweet, but also as I've gone deeper, I realized that the stakes are in it for everybody, I think. So I don't know that there's anything like unique that brings me to the angle that I happen to be at, but I think that the stakes are there for me as well. And it's on all of us to push forward.
Okay, well, the next question is, how do AAAS professors make flexible space for students to find their forms of writing, activism, art, etc.? And that came, I don't know if we're supposed to say the person's names. So, but Jeannie Klein asked that question. So, all right. Anyone want to take that up?
I'll just jump in. I think first and foremost, AAAS scholars took me seriously as a thinker, right? And so that was like the first major thing. I was like, oh, you mean you're willing to sit in your office and talk to me about these questions that I have? And also like recommend some other readings? Okay, cool, let's go. But I'll never forget being in Chico's Black Pop music class when he told us day one, we're gonna write a 30-page paper. And I looked at him, I struggled with 4 pages. And he was like, 30 pages over the course of the semester. And he broke it down, right? Like he unlocked, if writing a 30-page seminar paper was like some secret, he unlocked it, right? Like he told us, this is how we're gonna break it down, right? We're going to do this chunk, and this chunk is going to be social historical stuff. This chunk is going to be close reading. This chunk is going to be this, right? And like split it up over weeks. It's like the last thing that you're going to write is the introduction, right? Because how can you introduce a thing that you haven't done yet? I still use it now actively, right? And so for me, there was something to be said for taking something that seemed so beyond reach and just breaking it open so that we felt like it was within our grasp. And I just like applied it across context. It didn't matter if I was like in another course or if I was like preparing all of my little paperbacks that I bought on Mass Street for the Snyder book collecting contest at the library, which I did win second place. Somebody with a Mozart collection beat me, but I had all 1960s and 70s protest paperbacks, right? But that too was again because of AAAS. I was like, I don't need all this Mozart stuff. It's like Black folks been telling us what we got and what we need. And so, yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Well, I will say this. It is important to have someone, we actually do have a question that just came in. This is not a question, but I would just like to state that without the opportunity to take classes from the AAAS department, particularly the courses from Professor Shawn Alexander, I am confident that I would not be named a pre-doctoral fellow at the Carter G. Woodson, of Carter G. Woodson Department of Black Studies at the University of Virginia. I want to reinforce the crucial work that the AAAS department also provides to students from other departments. I am a PhD student in the history department, so at University of Virginia. I cannot pronounce the name, I'll butcher it. but it is from clearly a,
Jerome.
Say it again.
Jerome. No, that's not perfect, but I can approximate. Jerome.
Okay. Well, thank you for your wonderful comment there. That is ultimately the epitome of what, what we're supposed to be doing. So, and congratulations on your success. Best wishes to you as you pursue your doctoral studies. We may have another one. Do we have? Oh, that's the same question. Azja, what were you gonna say? Do you have?
Just thinking to the last one, just because I actually have recently been spending a lot of time thinking about a question like this, is like, how do we make spaces more accessible to those students? I think it can be really difficult for a lot of people because there's like, it's not just, I don't know, diversity, equity, inclusion courses. And I think that's something KU's focusing on a lot right now, is like, if we just have a training course for one size fits all, like, it's, I guess the thing I wanted to say is that it's not one size fits all. Every Black student needs something different. And it's not just about kind of generally understanding, Blackness, because that's kind of an impossible task, especially for someone who isn't living it every day. And even like Black people don't always have a language for like the stuff that we go through, the things that we want to learn about ourselves and our community. And so I think like, rather than looking at it that way, it's just like, I don't know, try to read more yourself and like branch out and try to understand just like different languages and ways that like different Black people explain things. Because I think the problem that I ran into for either my students that I teach currently or like people with me is like, when I was trying to answer a question or participate in class, it didn't look or sound the same as everyone else. And so it seemed wrong or incorrect. And that's a really easy way to shut down student participation and feeling like they can exist in a space, whether that be AAAS or any other department that you're in. And I think learning different ways that people communicate or try to, make space for themselves in your classroom, virtually or physically, is the first step to helping figure out their way that they sit and, create space for themselves or other people around them. And the more comfortable that, one Black person or two Black people are comfortable in your space, the more likely that they can help assist other Black students, and that space will become more welcome to them as well, because they can assist each other in that. So it's starting small, but I think that I wanted to say that because I think sometimes we can create too daunting of a task for teachers when we try to figure out the one perfect solution just because there isn't one. And that might sound kind of sad, but yeah.
Well, sure. That's really important. Regardless of the context, I think part of the learning experience generally, involves sort of learning how to feel comfortable with the fact that you have different questions or that you have different interpretations of, whatever the material is. I thought I was wrong 85% of the time when I was in undergraduate school, and I was actually doing fairly well. But the teacher had to tell me, look, okay, no, it's just that what you're saying isn't necessarily, what everyone else thinks, but it's okay. All right. So that's the point. We go to the library and look up W.E.B. Du Bois. You've got all kind of books on him, a lot of times on the same subject, right? So that's the whole point, I think, the larger issue and the larger, I think, function you were talking about, there's no cookie cutter or one size fits all for what is Blackness. I think that, one of the most important things of the discipline is that of cultural philosophy. It encompasses alternative epistemologies, concepts of knowledge, ways of producing knowledge, criteria of what constitutes knowledge, right? I mean, and that's understandable because Black people have very different experiences. All people of African descent, have different cultural standpoints on some level, from the Eurocentric model. So that's important on a number of levels, what you're talking about. How are we on time?
Whatever you want to do.
All right, so let's see. I don't see any other questions.
We can move to closing remarks then. Does anyone have anything else they want to say? And then,
well, we do have one question just popped up.
one question popped up.
Okay. We have a
We got
current
person
student,
coming in with the question, so we'll
a recent graduate and a current student.
student at the university.
So she says that she is typing. So we will wait.
We'll wait. I'll say, before I go into the closing remarks, I'll just say that, you guys all make us look good. And I greatly appreciate that. It was a pleasure teaching all of you, and continuing to teach and work with Azja. And this is what it's all about. I think that we see, you guys teach me, and I'm sure my colleagues would say the same, as much as we teach you. And sitting here bookending this day the way we set it up, with the founders, the foundation, student activists that created this department, and ending it here with where we're going in the future. We're looking back and looking forward at the same time, right? Using that Sankofa message of the symbol of, and I just thank you for everything you did, the fact that you come to our department and take our classes, and I greatly appreciate that. And Dr. Bolden works so hard as our undergraduate advisor, and we appreciate his work in that aspect, and we thank you, because again, you make us look good. As a graduate professor of mine once said, someone asked him why they don't have everything in the, why they're not in the newspaper all the time claiming that we're the Black Studies department you should know. And his response was, because when you get a job, they'll know who we are. And I feel the same thing with you. When you guys are out there and saying, I came from the AAAS department, you're telling everyone that that's where I came from. These are the people that taught me. And these are the people that helped create the department, a rich department of 50 years. And we'll leave that. I'll do some more closing remarks here after Tony takes over Allison's question.
All right, so
that was a big question. She was taking some time to write it.
Exactly. So this is from Allison Lewis. Thank you all for being here today! Exclamation point. So many of you have expanded on what Dr. Alexander was saying yesterday about AAAS being an intellectual home. So many of you continued your education outside of AAAS, where fields are not as always as supportive and welcoming. How have you been able to take your experiences from AAAS into different fields and create a Black Studies quote unquote home within them?
And I'll jump in since okay. So grad school was American Studies, and I was constantly asking, okay, but Blackness. For me, it's not simply a question of morality, or individual opinion. I'm like, this is a question of craft. If we're going to do this work, I need folks from various fields to attend to how it is that they're engaging Black life over and over and over. I'm like, that's my starting point. And for the folks who say, well, there's nothing there, I'm like, no, you have to prove the absence. Because there's so much evidence of our existence. There's so much evidence of the fact that we persist over and over and over and on and on and on and on and on. And if anything, the ways that we create and enact life exceeds disciplinary logics, right? And so even in my classrooms, I'm like, if you're gonna say that Black people are at the center of your work, then Black life cannot be merely a response to white supremacy, right? So for me, it's that kind of orientation. I'm constantly going in. It doesn't matter what context, what disciplinary context I'm operating in. I'm like beginning with the assumption that Black folks been knowing and been doing and been existing, right? And having that as an anchor helps expose oftentimes the limits of some other folks and disciplines, political, right, and intellectual imaginations. Right. And so that's the thing, is like I need that clarity. And it took a few years for me to get there, but it's always been back in the back of my mind waiting for me to arrive. Right. It's like, no, we've been here. Where and how is that coming up in the work? Right. And you know, if nothing else, like Professor Alexander, I'm gonna give you another shout out, man, because you got me on these archives. And even when I was like, the day I turned 25, I made the mistake of looking at Du Bois's itinerary for his 25th birthday because it's in that UMass collection. And I shamed myself in the rain in Iowa. But I also, right, like grew to understand it, like, oh, there were all of these conversations that were happening amongst Black intellectuals, amongst Black activists and artists. And that knowing continues to raise a whole series of questions in me when my colleagues presume that Black folk hadn't been doing XYZ. I'm like, we have. And so my question is how, over and over and over. So I take as a given that we've been doing. I take as a given that we got a whole host of active verbs that we deploy in our lives. And that alone is not about me simply refuting the claims of those who haven't done the reading and refuse to. It's about moving forward with a level of integrity, and like trying to do what I can to ensure that like we continue to center Black life in the work.
We have a statement from you know, one of the historic students, John Spearman. So congratulations to the AAAS. To AAAS for making this happen. You have done an amazingly valuable job of engaging and informing us. Thank you, and thank you on behalf of all of us. Let's see, do we have any other questions or any other responses to anything else that you all would like to share? If not, then Professor, well, let's see. So if not, then we can move to close. I'll let Professor Alexander handle this component of the program.
Thank you, Dr. Bolden. And again, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank this panel for, again, as I said before, making us look good, and all of your success and the way that you show us. You know, it's the question I asked, you know, Charisse Burden-Stully today. You know, how do we interact with other spaces? Where has Black Studies influenced other institutions? And we're seeing that, right? In what you do and how you interact beyond the academy. And I think that's extremely important. One thing that resonated with the students this morning is they were basically building a Black university within KU. They were building a Black institution when you listen to what they were saying. And you know, that is a profound thing to think about, right? That they were coming at a predominantly white institution and saying, we want to be here, but you don't give us the space, and we're going to create that space for ourselves. And on many levels, we are, you know, while some of those things don't exist, the department does. And that's what we're here for, to be that space and be that interaction. And I thank them and I thank you for expressing that. Again, I would just like to thank them, Walter Begoya, Dr. Albertine Harrison, Daryl Bright, Dr. Linda LeBaire, John Spearman, Brenda Van, and we could name more people, certainly, from that time period who gave so much for the creation of this department. I do want to reflect on at our 40th anniversary, Derrais was there. We brought Derrais for that one as well. We've lost people since then, but we had Roderick Bush participate, and Roderick has passed away since then. And I again want to reflect on him and his activism and participation here, and what they did to create this department. I would be remiss as well to not, as we've said, people gave a lot and a lot of people lost a lot. And we have, the history of KU is not well known, but hopefully we'll change that. And of course, the death of Tiger Dowdell, I think, is a huge weight, not only on the students that were here during the time, but it still is present in this department. And I will tell you that only in this manner. When I was teaching 106, the first half of the African American History Survey this semester, and we open it up and we talk about the brutality and violence, I always mention the violence that exists in the space that we're in Lawrence, Kansas. And I go through the lynching in 1882, and I mention the death of Tiger Dowdell and other acts of violence, racial violence that took place. And most people have no idea who Tiger Dowdell is, and it's my moment to actually interject that into that space and say, this is the department you're in, and this is it. But this time, I had a student walk up to me and say, "You're the first person who's ever mentioned my great uncle's name." Right? And that resonated with me, because I had it was not my objective, but he was also sitting there saying, "You're the first person that's recognized, right, the death of my uncle outside of my family." And so I think immediately he found a home, which is the point, right? Freshman person, new student on campus in this pandemic, right? Taking a class in person with me, right? In all those conditions, and is able to walk up and do that. And that's the space that we try to create here. And this is a beginning. I want to have these type of events more often, because it is, I've had people, as Dr. Pokadu said, it's a homecoming, and I've had other people say this is like a family reunion. And it is. It's great to see everyone, talk to everyone, and remember who we are. I love this department dearly. I love all my colleagues and the work that they do and the work that we put forth at this university. And as Owen and other students, Azja and others have said, a university that doesn't always love us back, to put it very simply. But we're here to do the work, because there is no space without being in a space for Black students and to teach this discipline that we believe in. And we know we're at a predominantly white institution, and we're going to continue to insert that into a space like this at the University of Kansas. And I greatly appreciate everything with that. In the spirit of that, as I said yesterday, we have started a fund. You can go to the webpage for the announcement of this site to see that fund. We did it in the name of John Spearman's family, the Spearman Family Student Fund, because we wanted to start a fund that was directly for students, that gave back to Black students and students in AAAS at this department. So, I just want you to share that. I'm not asking you to contribute. I'm asking you to share it with other people that may be able to contribute. But it is there, and it is, you heard a little bit of it from John Spearman. It's in the recognition of his entire family and the sacrifices they've given to this, not just the University of Kansas, but the Lawrence community and the Black community in the area. And I used it as not only a symbol of recognizing them, but a symbol of recognizing the actions and activities of the Black community at Lawrence. And we will be doing more things like that in this department and making this connection. I want to thank the 50th anniversary committee for bringing everything together. That was chaired by Dorothy Pennington. Peter Ojiambo was on it. Nicole Hodges Persley, Dorothy Hines, Jessica Schultz, Tony Bolden, and Randall Jelks. All contributed to helping bring this program together and develop it. And it's been a 2-year process, right, because of COVID. So understand that. So this is something that is taken on a lot of different space, and I thank them for all of their hard work. And any success that you may feel that we had in this program goes to them, and I thank them for their hard work. I also want to acknowledge the retired faculty who spend a long time with us. There's been faculty who have left, been here and gone, but they're specifically the retired faculty. And that is Naima Busafara, Arthur Drayton, Bryant Freeman, Jacob Gordon, and Beverly Mack. All people who helped create and build this department over the past 50 years, put substantial amount of time and effort into this. Again, there are many names that we could add to people who've been here and gone, but these are people who retired from our department. And I think that we should recognize them and understand them and thank them for their work and everything they've done. I also want to thank our colleagues in the Kansas African Studies Center, the Langston Hughes Center, the Institute of Haitian Studies, the Kenneth Spencer Research Library, and the Spencer Museum of Art, who all contributed to this program and what we do here today. And last but not least, I want to thank Shelley Berman, who is our office administrator, who helped us with multiple tasks and works. And historically, I want to recognize also Lisa Brown for her time and activity in this department. And she is here, she's in the audience, and you know, many people know the amount of years that Lisa was in our office and running our office, and everyone knows I still call Lisa with usually my first question about anything of being a chair. It's usually to Lisa and Peter very quickly. And so I thank them and thank their work. And we would never be able to do anything at the University of Kansas without Deborah Dandridge in the Spencer Research Library. I said it last night, but I will repeat it. The Spencer Research Library is a wonderful, wonderful archive. But the fact that we have an African-American archivist, and as I said before, a person I don't have to turn to and explain why I need those documents, as Derrais is saying. She would, you know, I remember when the first time when I came to the University of Kansas, and I went to her and said, we don't have this Black newspaper. I figured I was going to have to argue. And she's like, we don't? I will get it for you, right? And I said, where am I? This is a wonderful, wonderful space. So I thank them and thank everyone for their contributions. And the last thing I'll say is we do have a video of a history of the department. It is on the webpage. It's linked on the webpage that has the program. It's also on our main webpage that will take you to that space. If you go to the About space of the program of our webpage, you will see it drop down and it will say videos. It is a video that Dorothy Pennington did a number of years ago, a few years ago, with our first chair, Jacob Gordon. And I think it's a wonderful video for you people to watch and listen to hear about those early years of the department and the creation of those department. And it adds us the space that we do, right? So I thank everyone for their time and effort. This has been one of those marathon Zoom calls in many ways. And I thank you for hanging out with us and spending some time with us. And please keep in contact. Always reach out to the department through the department page, and we will get back to you and to keep you up with information that we do in this space. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. This is going to be that weird moment where I say thank you numerous times, and then I'm going to hit the end button and we all disappear. Right? It's in the Zoom world. So I appreciate it. I hope that you all have a wonderful, wonderful night. Just to show you the activism that we have, if you're in town, I will be joining Azja at 6 o'clock for a moment of silence, right, that the Jayhawk Liberation Front, the Black Student Coalition, and the Black Student Union formed around Black Lives Matter 2 weeks ago, and it keeps being more and more important. So I will look forward to seeing Azja and the students in about an hour and a half outside. So appreciate everything for everyone that everyone is doing, and have a wonderful weekend.